Hello, welcome to Lazada Insider, featuring knowledge that makes a difference. We share trusted insights, forward looking perspectives, and exclusive expert interviews to keep you ahead of the curve.
Hi everyone, I'm Chen, your host today. Shoppers expect seamless and consistent experience from a retailer or brands. According to IGD, cross-channel shoppers are the most valuable customers as they spend between twice to three times the amount a single channel shopper does. Today, we are delighted to be joined by expert guest Jon from IGD. He has more than a decade of experience in researching retail globally, delivering solutions and presentations for retailer on key industry topics like store of the futures, omni-channels, and channels evolutions. Hi, Jon. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much for inviting me.
First of all, could you let us know a bit more about yourself and what you do in IGD?
Certainly. So I've been researching global retailing for about nearly 20 years now. So I've been researching mainly from research companies' points of view, global retailing and its evolution. So from all the way through, I guess, the beginning of e-commerce through to the topic we look at today, which is omnichannel retailing.
Sure. Thanks for the quick intro. And now let's enter the topic for today. So we have been hearing a lot about this term, omni-channels retailing. So what exactly is omni-channels retailing? And is it very different with the multi-channels retailing that we heard quite often as well?
Yeah, so I think, there are a lot of terms that people use to describe retailing, and I think sometimes we get a little bit caught up in some of those terms. But I think there is a vast difference between multi-channel retailing and omni-channel retailing. And the evolution that we're seeing at the moment from retailers' points of view really is coming so much quicker. Accelerated by the pandemic, brought quicker by that, and the demands that have been put on retailers to meet shopper demand. But this difference between multi-channel and omni-channel retailing, is a really obviously great place to start for this discussion around what omni-channel retailing is today and what it will become in the future. So, from a multi-channel point of view, we would see that as being, all channels are available to a shopper, but they're not necessarily integrated. So a shopper can buy a product in any channel from a retailer, and a retailer could be operating different size stores, be it hypermarkets, supermarkets, online, and then obviously a lot of different fulfillment methods through online. So be it click and collect or delivery, or even fast-paced delivery within 15 minutes. So they can buy from a shopper's point of view across any of these channels, but the experience has not always been integrated, or seamless. And the impact, therefore, from a retailer's point of view is that they don't necessarily get the holistic view of how the shopper shops across channels, the various touch points, the way they're engaging both with the retailers, but also the brands that they're buying. And certainly out of store, that sort of lack of data and insight is a sort of downside of multi-channel retailing. If we then look at it from an omni-channel point of view, I think the difference for a shopper probably is that it probably doesn't look any different, but it feels and should increasingly feel different, because in terms of it's still the same channels, and the way that they potentially buy products may be the same, but the engagement, the way that retailers engage with shoppers, the way they promote brands and how brands can engage with shoppers is going to feel very different, because as in new strategies and initiatives are implemented, so the way that retailers and brands can talk to shoppers should become more personalized and more seamless. So it doesn't really matter where a shopper is, and again, across different stores, out of store, and even not really necessarily if they're thinking about buying, if they're just researching or thinking about a product, that becomes much more consistent in an omni-channel world than it is in a multi-channel world, where it can feel at times, from a shopper's perspective, a little bit more fragmented or a little bit more mass market. Omnichannel will enable and improve the targeting and the personalization that they receive from retailers and from brands more widely.
Sure. Thanks for highlighting the difference between the multi-channels and the omni-channels retailing. So now we focus on the omni-channels retailing. If we analyze or we look at this topic from the angle of brands or the merchants, so why do you think businesses should adopt an omni-channel strategy, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is that shoppers want it. Essentially, I think the pandemic has really shown that desire from shoppers to buy products when they want and have them delivered where they want, or to buy the product in a store, but have the reassurance and the knowledge that the product's going to be there when they want to go buy it. So I think, from a retailer standpoint, is the fact that even if they don't feel like it's going to touch on them now, because other retailers are going to be bringing in omnichannel retailing, it's going to become something that shoppers expect. And certainly from a brand's point of view, shoppers are going to be opened up to new avenues of information and insight and transparency around supply chains that's going to enable them to buy easier and quicker. So I think the first and the key reason for all of it always should be around the shopper, which we always start with a shopper from an IGD research point of view. And I think the first thing should always be that the shopper will increasingly want an omni-channel experience, or certainly expect an omni-channel experience. You touched on the second point, I guess, really in the introduction, which is that omni-channel shoppers are more valuable even today. So, and if we think we're only at the sort of start of this process, the numbers that you quoted, Walmart think an omni-channel shopper is spends twice as much money as a non-omni-channel shopper. And Ahold Delhaize, which has operations across the US and a lot of countries in Europe, estimates it could be up to 3 times as much for some of their shoppers. So that loyalty and that spend is going to be very, very key for retailers. And of course, that knowledge that brands can have that those retailers have loyal shoppers helps them engage and build better targeting and marketing strategies that can then provide better return on investment and value for them. And I think this is, as I say, just the start of this process. So, we're in a good place in certain retailers, and loyalty is becoming better. And the use of data, which is something I think we'll probably touch on again later in terms of our conversation, is becoming better. But that idea and the ability to target shoppers and build loyalty with those shoppers will only improve. And so if we think about this as being the starting place for this omni-channel journey, it's going to be only improve over time in terms of the way that retailers and manufacturers can use data to target shoppers, be it groups or individuals, and build that loyalty yet further. So that number, that two to 3 times, is only going to probably grow as developments come down the line. And that use of data and really understanding shoppers will be increasingly key. And I think that would be the fourth point that we would make about why omnichannel is so important, is that insight that data will be able to provide both retailers in terms of enabling them to speak and engage with shoppers, but also from a brand's point of view in terms of how to engage their shoppers within their category, with their specific products, and also in areas like new product development. So launching a product in a new country, or even just trying to build out a new sort of branded variation or extension, will all be aided by the greater use of data. And I think, once we look a little bit further, and we'll probably come and touch on this in a minute, is where we're going probably with omnichannel retailing, the idea of ecosystems. So keeping shoppers spending within an ecosystem, so the likes of Alibaba and Amazon and Walmart, building out that idea of not just selling products, but including other things like media and entertainment, financial services, and really sort of understanding what shoppers are looking for and really understanding how they want to interact with brands and themselves, and how they want to spend their time and their money, but also how to improve on that ecosystem and the way they engage with them, which comes all the way back to the beginning, which is that the shoppers want it. And wherever retailers and brands can remove friction from people's lives, it's only going to become more popular, it's going to become a better system for them to use.
Sure, I think that is very interesting. So from your experience, so what are some of the key challenges for businesses so when they start to adopt this omni-channel journey, and what are your advice how they can actually overcome these challenges?
Yeah. I mean, if it was easy, we probably wouldn't be sitting here today, because there wouldn't be as much to discuss. But it really is. It is quite a challenge. And through our research, we've sort of identified, I think 5 major areas where there's challenges, both from a retailer's point of view, but then how that then flows through and potentially impacts on brands and manufacturers as well. And the first one really at the moment is around cost from a retailer standpoint. We know how competitive this industry is, and the pandemic has brought new cost into quite a lot of retailers' business, and required changes in terms of the way they operate. And so there's all that cost that's being brought into the business. We've got inflation in quite a lot of places around the world in terms of cost increases, personnel cost increases. So there's a lot of cost coming into the industry at the moment. And then omnichannel brings a whole new level potentially on top of that. So things like Kroger in the US, who's working with Ocado, when they've estimated how much one of the sort of the robot-driven warehouses that they're putting into the US, they estimate each one costs about $55 million US. Even if you look at micro fulfillment centers that retailers are adding into their existing stores, they can cost between $3 and $5 million each. And if a retailer like Ahold Delhaize has like 4,000 supermarkets, you can see quite quickly how the cost of all that adds up very, very quickly to try and meet quicker e-commerce needs, to try and then build out and support the omni-channel needs of a retailer. And I think that's really difficult for them to deal with, and how they then also try and think about which of those different fulfillment options to provide, which then flows through for manufacturers. Is they may be having somebody like Kroger with a big warehouse. You might get somebody else with a micro fulfillment center, and then you may get sort of quick delivery, 15-minute delivery of people on bikes. And so you can go from a very wide range at one end of the spectrum, all the way through to a very targeted range at the other end, which manufacturers have to deal with and think about in terms of what products to then try and sell to that retailer, or to engage with through those different parts. I think the other area really is around capability, is that retailers have suddenly got a whole new area of capability that they've got to quickly come up to speed on. They're very good and have a history on a global basis of running stores, running supply chains that deliver from central distribution centers to those stores. But now they've got a whole new number of questions, basically, that their business needs to answer. So that capability is something they need to fill very quickly. So again, that can come back at a cost and feed back into the first point, or actually getting people and retaining those people can be difficult for quite a lot of retailers as well. So that capability question is very, very difficult. It is highly complex. So, to sort of cover off that point around the different types of warehouses and the different supply chains, obviously there's a lot of complexity that comes into omnichannel retailing, and that sort of understanding the holistic shopper. So, linking all the different channels, identifying individuals, sharing the data, engaging with brands potentially in a new way, and working with manufacturers can be different. And trying to sit that along sort of short-term trading needs, quarter by quarter, and sitting that against longer term horizons and planning, again, is something that some businesses and retailers struggle with in terms of trying to maintain both of them at the same time. There's a whole thing around coordination about who leads this. Retailers in the past have been very set up channel by channel or thinking very job by job. So you have a marketing team, you have a supply chain team. But now in an omnichannel world, all those teams need to fit together and integrate into themselves so they can speak and engage with the shopper as one. And trying to, again, do that at the same time as all these other things is, again, very difficult. And who leads on that can be a very difficult decision as well, depending on how and where the power in a business sits or who influences certain decisions. And this really comes down to our fourth one, which is around sort of culture, really, in terms of omnichannel retailing is demanding pace of change and retailers to evolve much quicker than they potentially have in the past. And so depending on the culture of the business and their ability, their willingness to change quickly, then omnichannel retailing is asking a whole new set of questions. And then I think the last challenge is around choice. So, with the technology that's available at the moment, there's lots of different choice in terms of what a retailer can choose. There's also a lot of different sorts of software, and then there's also a lot of business decisions that need to be made at the moment. And so trying to think about which one to solve first, because it all overlaps and integrates, again, is very, very difficult. And so all those sorts of challenges, I guess, come together for retailers and then are slightly magnified for manufacturers, because they'll have a whole different set of retailer clients who will all be at different stages and have different challenges themselves, and therefore they'll have to work potentially at different paces or in different ways with different retailers. So I think as it goes through, everybody will start to evolve in a similar way strategically, but that doesn't mean operationally they'll all be in the same place or operate in the same way, which will again cause challenges for manufacturers. I think in terms of overcoming those challenges, I think this is a great example of how you can become aware of what's happening globally. I think there is going to be sort of no one solution for omnichannel retailing. There may be a model, there may be a framework, and you can try and fit yourself within that, but the solutions that come out are going to be different, potentially country by country, certainly retailer by retailer, such that they can meet their shopper needs, and how you as a manufacturer will be able to meet your shoppers' needs as well will be quite key within that. So I think keeping aware of global best practice outside of your region is a really great way to start to think about how to overcome that challenge and what has been successful elsewhere or unsuccessful, actually. I mean, we learn so much more really by seeing how other people have failed at stuff than we do from potential successes in our own businesses. So I think, that is a key area. And the other thing really is around making sure that we're always checking our data and quantifying the gains that we're making. We can do the idea of test and learn, which is a great phrase, but at the same time, if we're not understanding the impact that it's having or the benefits that we're getting from it, then testing and learning doesn't really get us anywhere. It's just doing exactly that. It's just testing and learning. So we have to keep on understanding where the benefits are coming from.
Last but not least, so how do you see omnichannel retailing evolve in the next few years?
So I think from our point of view is that change is going to feel like it's occurring slowly, and these sort of little developments are going to happen bit by bit, but suddenly we're going to sit back and go, wow, things have changed quite a lot. And suddenly that impact for shoppers is going to happen very, very quickly. And I think that's a key part, is the fact that you need to be building your foundations today, because even if you don't think your category may be impacted, or potentially your country or the market that you work in is going to be impacted, it is going to be impacted at some point. And if you don't start preparing for it now, and listening to things like this, and learning more from about omnichannel retailing, you're going to be in a weaker position come when that change actually hits. So I think, once successful initiatives and tech solutions sort of emerge, the ability for them to be adopted on a global basis, and certainly regionally, becomes much, much quicker. And therefore the impact's going to be much, much quicker. So, I think at this point it's going to be slow, but then very, very big. And in terms of, I guess, sort of bit by bit, how we think it's going to impact, I think for shoppers, omnichannel will really continue to evolve, and increasingly empower them by providing them with more and different ways to shop, but also access to more information and transparency on what they're buying and where they're buying it from. So that's brilliant. It's a freeing part in terms of they'll be able to choose how, where, when they buy a product, and then how and where they receive that product. So whether that's delivery to home or in a store, it doesn't really matter at that point. So I think, it's going to be really freeing for shoppers. And I think it's also going to be increasingly cross-border, increasingly global. So new competitors are going to emerge for all of us, depending on where a product's made, where a brand is. And that is, again, a great opportunity for shoppers, but also for brands as well, to be able to target, to sell into new countries, which we never would have had access to before. So I think that'll be a great opportunity. So people will be able to shop globally, but then receive the product locally, wherever they want to. And I think this is where omnichannel retailing is almost evolving on itself. And some people are starting to use the phrase unified commerce, and that means that sort of all the channels and the engagement are built around the shopper, and really focused on being totally shopper centric. And so that, I think, will be a really key part, again, of retailers and manufacturers' thought processes over the next year or so, about really focusing in on the shopper, and how then all that information or the data flows in real time, so that a shopper can have confidence that what they're buying will arrive in 2 days time, 1 day time, 15 minutes time, and have complete accuracy of availability, transparency about manufacturing, where it's come from, and everything else. I think for stores, it's going to require and think about sort of an ever greater digitization of what those stores are, certainly in the medium term. So things like payment solutions where you just walk out, they'll become much more ubiquitous. And then a greater integration of online solutions, by like reviews or recommendations being highlighted and used in store. But online generally will just be much more integrated into stores, helping bring products to life, enabling brands and manufacturers to engage with those shoppers much more. And obviously the bit we touched on at the beginning around, it'll provide more personalization. The data gathered on shoppers today and in the future will enable retailers and manufacturers to better target and meet individual and personal shopper needs. And that sort of general idea of personalization will be really, really key. For retailers, you can see that it's going to be a huge impact on store-based retailers. But I think the opportunity it provides on a global basis is about partnerships. So how can you work with manufacturers, potentially other retailers across different parts of the globe, to enable your shoppers to buy the products they want and have them fulfilled? So we're seeing, quite a few non-competing retailers work with each other to make sure that omnichannel works for them and for their shoppers. So I think, in terms of that, it'll be really interesting to see. I think finally around the retailers is that there are going to be retailers who can adapt, change. We're going to see new retailers emerge, but there are going to be those who can't. And I think we're going to have to bear in mind that there will be consolidation in the market more widely. And therefore, there are going to be a whole set of winners who are going to emerge from omnichannel retailing potentially quicker than in other parts of retailing's evolution recently. But I think as a shopper, rather than as an analyst, I think this is really exciting. Omnichannel retailing provides such a wealth of opportunity for us as shoppers to buy products, engage with retailers, engage with brands in a whole new way that we didn't have before, because of the data and the transparency and the insight that it will bring. So, I think it's a really fantastic future that we look forward to as a shopper and as an industry as well.
Sure. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you, Jon, for the great sharing.
Thank you very much.
This is Lazada Insider. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure you click follow and subscribe so you don't miss our latest insights and expert interviews. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Lazada.